I know it's a little early, but how many of you enjoy watching the Super Bowl? How many of you don't? Yeah, there was a few weirdos in the first service too. That's okay. I love watching football. I love the Super Bowl. It happens every February. So again, I know it's a little early, right? We're about halfway through the regular season with the playoffs still to go. But I watch the Super Bowl every year. I am most interested, obviously, when my favorite team happens to be in it, which over the last 20 years has been quite frequently. But even when it's not, I still enjoy just the compelling nature of this particular contest. But one thing, interestingly, that I don't like is Super Bowl parties. Like I love the Super Bowl. I don't like Super Bowl parties. How many of you are really you don't like the Super Bowl, you just like the Super Bowl party? Like if you were really honest, it's all right. That's what I'm there. I'm not there for the game per se. I am there for the food. I am there for the camaraderie. I am there for the celebration of what this thing is. Like I know some of you are in this place today, you don't like the Super Bowl at all because you're good Christians, right? You're good Jesus followers. And on Sunday night, on Super Bowl Sunday, you're at home just being with the Lord, right? Praying, reading your Bible while the rest of us heathens are eating nachos and, just enjoying the festivities of the game. Well, let me tell you why I don't like Super Bowl parties, because I know you're really interested. I don't like Super Bowl parties because I really like the game. And Super Bowl parties are not really a good part of the game if you like watching the game. Like I want to watch the game without the distractions of all these other people that aren't really there for the game, right? People start talking and yakking, and especially, I don't know about you, but I enjoy watching the commercials too. Like this is the one football game over the course of the year that I'll watch live and not just try to fast forward through all the commercials, right? Because the commercials are the things you talk about the next day, but there's a lot of annoying people at Super Bowl parties, and they get in the way of all that, right? I want to experience the game without the distractions. Another thing I like to do, and this happens throughout the year, but I like to watch movies. And we watch movies from time to time at home. I love watching them in the theater, but we watch movies at home, and most of the time, the movie's being watched by my son and me. And I usually have to watch a movie with the subtitles on. Anybody do that? I gotta watch the subtitles on. The reason for that is because I'm married. And I'm not allowed to watch a movie in my home at the appropriate volume that a movie should be watched. You know what I'm talking about? Right? Like the movie's supposed to be loud enough, not just so that you hear it, but so that you feel it. Like you don't spend money on speakers and a sound system, so that you have to cup your hand over your ear and try to hear what somebody's saying. No, I want to know what's going on in the movie, but I'm not allowed to watch it at that particular volume, what I like to call man volume, okay? That's just not permitted. So I have to turn the subtitles on. And the reason I need the subtitles is because I don't want to miss the lines. I get, there's times where the movie's really, really loud, right? And there's explosions happening and, just stuff going on all over the place. But then there's times where it's really, really quiet and somebody's talking in a low voice. And in those moments, it's like, unless you're quick with the volume, you miss the lines. Like you'd miss gems, like what we get when Tony Stark met his dad and was relaying to his dad from the past something that he had learned from his dad. This beautiful line where he said, "No amount of money ever bought a second of time." You see, without the subtitles, I might miss that because I might not be able to hear it. And I have this fear that if I don't hear every line, I'll miss a part of the story. And again, that's what I want. Like when I'm watching a movie, I'm not just watching it for the eye candy that it is on a TV screen. I'm not just necessarily watching it, for the pictures. I want to know what the story, how the story is unfolding and what's going on. And there's a lot of little nuances, in a good movie. And so you miss that with the distractions of things that might be going on around you. And so today I want to talk about how distractions keep us from experiencing the life that God really wants for us. We are highly distracted, are we not? As a society, as a people, we're highly distracted. I mean, we hear it all the time about how big a problem distracted driving is, for instance, right? People are driving distracted all the time. You're not supposed to text and drive. You're not supposed to have a device in your hand when you're driving. I mean, recommendation is you're not even supposed to be eating or drinking. Believe it or not, you're not even supposed to be doing your makeup in the morning when you're driving, right? All those things qualify as distracted driving. Did you know, we have one insurance agency being represented over here in the back corner, and so I know she knows, but did you know that 8 people every single day die from distracted driving? Can you imagine that? For no other reason except that a person that was operating a motor vehicle was not focused on the job at hand, another person's life has taken, to the tune of 8 people a day in our country. And so distracted driving is a big problem. But we have distractions not only in the car, we have distractions at work. Right? One study shows that on average, when we go to work, we experience 56 disruptions over the course of a regular workday. You do the math, that means that on average, every 8.5 minutes of our day, we are interrupted. And as a result of that, we spend in that average 8-hour workday about 2 hours simply refocusing on the work that we left off because of the interruption. Nearly 1/4 of the time that we're supposed to spend working, we are refocusing ourselves on the work that we were supposed to have been doing. And you'd think that when we get out of work and we punch the clock and we head home, as soon as we walk through the doors of our homes, we are suddenly distraction-free, right? Like everybody just gets to breathe a sigh of relief. I'm home, right? Let me just enjoy the rest of this day, the rest of this evening without the fear of distractions. But how many of you know there's lots of distractions at home? Lots of distractions, right? Because when you walk through the door of your house, you know what opens up to you is an entire world of opportunities, all kinds of different things that you can participate in so that you don't have to talk to anybody in your family. Right? For some of you, it's the television. And you get down in front of the TV, and that's the end, right? It's like, oh, mom's done for the day. Dad's done for the day, right? They're in front of the TV. And if it's not TV that happens to be your cup of tea, don't worry. There's other things that will vie for your attention, right? There's this thing called the internet. You ever heard of it? The internet offers an infinite variety of information about all kinds of things. It's just a big black hole. You can get yourself in front of a computer or a tablet or even your phone and just scroll and scroll and scroll through whatever it is that you want. Social media, obviously a really big part, a growing part of our everyday lives. People spend hours of their day on social media. This is not one particular media that I enjoy personally, but every once in a while I'm on it, right? And so when I launched the Facebook app, one of the things that I've discovered is that as you scroll through Facebook, you can just keep on scrolling. Did you know that? Like you never come to the end. I mean, it's the beauty of a movie. Eventually, the end happens, right? And the credits roll. That's the good thing about a book. You know, as you're moving your way from left to right in the book, there are more pages on the left side than the right side until you get to the end. But with Facebook, you just keep on scrolling, right? Ooh, I like this, right? And you get kind of lost in this little black hole of, you know, something somebody posted, some event that's going on, or some comments, or some fight, right, that's taking place, you know, in your little world of drama. And when you're done with that, you just keep on scrolling. We have our mobile phones, and we can load onto our little mini pocket computers an array of games that can distract us from, you know, anything else. We all have cars to get to places. You know, there used to be a day where, you know, when you were home, you were kind of at home. And I don't know about you, but like we're just in this phase of life where we have 5 people in our family. 2 of them have this crazy schedule of college and work. One of them's in high school who's about to get his license. And so for the 5 of us, guess how many vehicles we own? That's right, it's 5. right? Because everybody needs their own car. There's no way that my two daughters, each with their own schedules that take them to very different places, that they could coexist or cooperate with one car. My wife has to go her way for work. I have to go my way for work. We're all spread out in different places, different directions, and so we all need our own modes of transportation to get there. And so when there's not enough to distract us at home, when we're actually physically in this place where we live with other people, there's plenty of opportunity for us to just get in the car and drive somewhere and find something else that will occupy our attention. We are highly distracted. Our whole lives are full of distractions. Now, today I want to talk about living in the moment, which is something I am terrible at. Now, you thought I was bad at what I was talking about last week. This is just as bad, maybe worse. This thing called living in the moment. If you haven't been here for the last couple of weeks, we started this series called A Better Way. And the idea behind it is that some of us have come to realize that we are not living our lives, what we would perceive as the best way. And Jesus provides an alternative way for us to live our lives. In week number 1, we learned that sometimes we come to this realization that I am just not the me I want to be. As I consider where my life has brought me, I'm just not in the place where I want to be. And we learned that week that Jesus offers a life of rest. A life of rest in exchange for the lives of stress that we are generally living our lives by. The anxiety, the stress, the worry. Jesus, he said with this invitation, come to me. Come to me and learn from me. That's what Jesus invites us to come to him and learn from him. He says, come and take my yoke upon you. We learned what this yoke was all about. Right? He says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. The reality is most of us, we're walking around this life loaded down with heavy burdens. And Jesus says, if you will come to me and if you'll learn from me and learn my ways, learn a better way of doing life, you will find with me a burden that is light. And then last week we talked about how we are too busy. We're just too busy for the things that matter the most. And we learned how Jesus modeled an unhurried life, a life that was not so much unlike ours in that he didn't experience, troubles and difficulties. I mean, he had all kinds of troubles and difficulties that came his way. We talked about how life is sort of like, the waves of the ocean, just one after another, crashing over our heads, crashing on us. And we just have to kind of stand there and take the beating. And we do that day after day after day, week after week, right? We just continue in the grind with the circumstances of our lives just rolling over us like the waves of the sea. But Jesus invites us into something different. He invites us into a life that's lived at a pace where it's not that the waves stop crashing over us. It's just that a life that's lived at the pace at which Jesus lived his life allows for those circumstances to come. It accommodates those troubles, those circumstances as they come. Today I want to talk about living in the moment. Do you know that most of us are not present where we are most of the time? I've already lost some of you. Statistically speaking, some of you are already gone, right? You have left the building. I know you're here, but your mind has been detached from where your body rests. It could have been a message on your phone that's triggered, some distraction. It could be the feeling that you really have to go to the bathroom, and you wonder how much longer this is going to go on, and should you wait or should you go? Feel free to go if you must. We daydream, right? Like what I am talking about maybe is not something you're particularly interested in, so your mind is going to something else, like the errands you need to run after church. I got to go to the grocery store, and how bad are the crowd's going to be, and we got to get lunch, and I got to do this and that. So most of us aren't present where we are. And this happens, this obviously happens in a setting like this, right? Who wants to listen to some guy talk for what might be an hour and a half? I don't. But it happens even in small places when we're with one other person. Like how many times do you find yourself in a conversation with just one other person and you're not really there? The person is talking, but you're not really listening, or vice versa. You're talking to that person, and suddenly you just become aware of, this person is not listening to what I say. Can I get an amen from a spouse? Thank you. Right? We're not present where we are generally. But Jesus, he lived in the moment. He was an expert. He was a pro at living in the moment. If you have your Bibles, turn to the Gospel of Matthew chapter 20. We're going to read a little story here and discover a little bit of what it meant for Jesus to be present in the moment. Matthew chapter 20. I just want to read a few verses here, starting in verse 29. As Jesus and his disciples left the town of Jericho, a large crowd followed behind. This is a very common scene you'll find as you read through the Gospels, these narratives of Jesus' life. You'll find over and over again Jesus making his way from one place to another, and crowds of people following him. And so at this particular place, he's in and around the city of Jericho, and a crowd is following behind. And it says that there were two blind men sitting beside the road. One of the gospel accounts says that they heard some ruckus, and they knew that something was happening, something was brewing, right? Because when Jesus made his way from place to place, oftentimes it came with a lot of pomp and circumstance, right? Because of all the people that wanted to see him. And so they asked, what's going on? And they were told that Jesus was making his way to where they were. So it says, when they heard that Jesus was coming that way, they began shouting, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us. And they just kept shouting that over and over and over and over again. You know, like a child that's trying to get the attention of his or her parents, right? Because they want something. They just kept shouting out over and over again, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us. Well, the crowd that was around, they didn't like it. They didn't like, these two men making all of this noise because they were there for their own individual experience, right? And they felt like these guys were kind of interfering with what they wanted. And so they tried to quiet them down. Be quiet, the crowd yelled at them. But they only shouted the louder, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us. Again, just get the picture in your mind, right? This crowd is starting to grow and develop, and Jesus is slowly making his way from one place to another. And somewhere out there on the outskirts, there are these two men that are just screaming at the top of their lungs, like a couple of fanatics, like a couple of weirdos, calling out over and over again for Jesus to have mercy on them. Well, it says that when Jesus heard them, he stopped. He stopped, and he called out for them. One of the gospel writers says he commanded that the two blind men be brought to them. So now here Jesus is face to face with these two blind men, and he asks them this question. He says, what do you want me to do for you? And they responded, Lord, they said, we want to see. And Jesus felt sorry, or in some translations says he felt compassion for them, and he touched their eyes, and instantly they could see. And then they followed him. Now again, in the story, it's very, very common to so many of the other stories. Jesus is walking around, a large crowd is following. If you could just imagine with me what that must have looked like as more and more people were ascending on this scene. They were probably doing like what we would do when there was a parade beginning. Everybody jockeying for position. And you see, like, when a parade is about to happen, people start lining the streets, right? They don't go deeper, right? They go longer, right? Because everybody wants to be in the front. Everybody wants to have a good vantage point to see the parade as it's making its way through the procession. And the same goes for all of these people. Right? And so the streets just continued to grow in how they were lined up with people. And there were these two blind men who were incapable of jockeying for position like everybody else was because they couldn't see. They were at a disadvantage, obviously, of getting to a place where they could actually be near to where Jesus was. And so they did the only thing they could do, and that is they screamed at the tops of their lungs. The crowd, as we were shown here, they were distracted by their own desire for an experience with Jesus, right? They didn't want to miss out as Jesus was walking along the road that maybe Jesus would be talking about something and they wanted to be able to hear it. They were like me with the movie and the subtitles. They didn't want to miss a line. And these two guys, they were just screaming over and over and over again. They were getting in the way of the crowd's ability to have this experience with Jesus. They were afraid of missing out. And because of their fear of missing out, because of their own distractedness, they were unable to see the blind men. They were unable to see, the men for who they were and what they needed. They just completely overlooked them, which is really interesting. I mean, the crowd, they had certainly heard about how Jesus was this great teacher and how he performed miracles right in front of people. And here was this miracle needing to happen right there in front of them, and they failed to see it for themselves. But what happened with Jesus? Again, with all the commotion of all that's going on, right? And just the general kind of noise that naturally exists whenever a crowd is there. And then these two, maybe even among others, just screaming over and over and over again. What does it say that Jesus did? It said that Jesus stopped. He stopped. Last week we learned that Jesus, he went about his life at a very deliberate pace. We learned that to follow Jesus meant that you had to adopt for yourself the pace at which Jesus lived his life. We find as we read the stories of Jesus, he's always walking from place to place. He's never running, he's never rushing, he's never in a hurry, he's never screaming at the disciples, come on guys, let's go, we gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go. Right? He doesn't ever have that wonderful Sunday morning family experience, where everybody who loves Jesus starts screaming at their kids, right? Because they're late for church. Like Jesus never did that. He walked. He never got in a car and drove at 50, 60, 70 miles an hour to get from one place to the next. He was never looking for the most efficient way to get from point A to point B. He just walked. And if we're going to live as Jesus lived, if we're going to experience the life that Jesus wants for us, we have to adapt to the pace, the cadence at which Jesus lived his life. But today, we take it a step further and find not only did Jesus walk from place to place, but Jesus was willing to stop when necessary. He was willing to stop. And I don't know about you, but this is something that I'm really terrible at. This thing called stopping, right? Because I'm one of those people that just wants to go. Like I want to go, right? Whatever it is. Even when, I could show you, the text threads on my phone. Even when it's time for me and my son Zachary to watch a movie, right? The other day, we're like, hey, you want to watch something? Sure, all right. So I go downstairs and I get the thing set up. And guess who's taking a long time? Dilly-dallying to get downstairs to watch whatever it is we were going to watch. My son Zach. And so what did I text him? Hurry up. It's like I can't even stop to watch a movie for crying out loud. That's how dysfunctional I am. Right? We're terrible at stopping, but it says Jesus stopped. And listen, what's really interesting about this story? So this story is told in 3 of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And there's lots of stories that are told by different gospel writers, and they're always told with like just a little bit of a different kind of point of view. And in this story, here we're introduced to these 2 blind men. In one of the other accounts, it focuses on just one of them and names him, tells us his name is Bartimaeus, and completely leaves the other guy out, right? And so there are these different angles at which the story is presented to us, but what is common to all 3 of them is the time in Jesus' life when they took place. Now, for some of you, that doesn't mean a whole lot, but when you read the Gospels, the biographical nature of the literature doesn't require that the events that are told be in chronological order. And so when you read one gospel, you'll find, events happening in a certain order, and then in another gospel, you'll find it happening in a different order. And again, may not be all that interesting to you, but, for those of us that like things to be sequential, we're like, now why is that? Well, it just wasn't important. Like, that's not what that kind of literature was intended to do. It's intended to provide a biographical sketch of a person. But here, all three of these stories are talked about in exactly the same time of Jesus' life. And that time of Jesus' life was the end. This is not something that happened as Jesus was, at the beginning of his ministry or in the middle of this ministry. This was at the end. You turn the page in all three Gospels, and like the next thing that's happening is Jesus is making his way into Jerusalem for the final time. Like, this is it. All of what Jesus has been doing, all of the teaching, all of the miracle working, all of the healing, all of the feeding of the 5,000, all of the calming the storms of the sea, all of that stuff, all of that is leading up to this massive crescendo as Jesus' life is coming to its end. Everything that Jesus has done up to this point is now leading up to what is just around the corner. And even in light of all that must have been whirring around in his mind, all of what he knew what he was facing as he made his triumphal entry into Jerusalem, Jesus stopped. I don't know about you, but it's like, especially when I find myself in those moments where, the stress of all the stuff that I've been doing mounts up, it is then that it's just most difficult for me to stop. Imagine if you, at whatever it is that you do for work, imagine if you had this project that you worked on for months and months and months, right? All kinds of planning went into it and purchasing and communication with other people, right? And now you're at the very end when it's time for that thing that you've been working on for so long to finally be executed. Many of you have gotten married. Maybe you remember all of the planning that went into getting ready for the wedding, right? This ceremony that lasts a handful of minutes, but takes for some of us a year to plan for, right? And just imagine you're kind of at the very end, and all of these moving parts are needing to be put together, right? And you got to make sure that everything is just the way it's supposed to be, right? Because if it doesn't go the way you want it to go, then it feels like all of the stuff you've done before getting ready for it is just wasted. Some of you students, you know what this feels like in school, right? Like, you go to school and you study and you do your homework and you take tests and you study some more, and eventually the semester ultimately leads up to the finals. And it is there that you kind of have that last rush of things that you have to do and study for and get ready for so that you can do well on your finals, so that all of the work that you've done beforehand won't feel like it's gone for nothing. That's exactly where Jesus was. Jesus was in, the day of the wedding, as it were. Jesus was at the time where it's like, okay, it is time for us to execute the plan that we've been working on for all these years. And so think about, with all that stress and all of what the next few hours, the next few days meant in Jesus' life, he stopped. And when Jesus stopped, he got himself in a position where the only people that were around were he himself and the two people who needed his attention. The disciples hadn't gone anywhere. They're probably still like kind of tugging on Jesus' sleeves, like, come on, Jesus, we gotta keep going. Hey, this crowd's getting a little out of control. It's gonna start getting dangerous here. Let's keep moving, let's keep going. Right? The crowds are getting bigger, the crowds are pressing in. But the most important thing to Jesus in that moment, like it always was for Jesus, was the person right in front of him. He asked them, what do you want me to do for you? It's almost as if the entire world just kind of shut down and there was nobody else except for Jesus and those two men. Can you imagine what your relationships would look like with other people if from time to time you were given the ability to have the time and the space and the resolve to live distraction-free, so that the only thing that mattered was that person in front of you? Whether that was your child, whether that was your spouse, whether that was a good friend, whether that was a coworker, whether that was somebody that was hurting and that was in need. And instead of just trying to get through the moment, like, come on, let's go, I got to get on to the next thing, what if the only thing that was important was what mattered right now? Jesus was never distracted from what mattered now. He never was. He was never distracted from what mattered right now. You know, Jesus would never have worn a watch. He never would have worn, if there was such a thing as a watch, Jesus never would have worn a watch. A couple hundred years before Jesus walked on this earth, there was an author, a playwright, who wrote these words. He cursed the invention and the inventor of the sundial, right? This is before watches and clocks and all that, right? This is where people started to tell time through the technology of a sundial. And he cursed the day the sundial was invented. And he described the sundial as something that cuts and hacks the day wretchedly into small portions. Think about what our days look like. What do? We dissect our days into their little tiny individual pieces, all of those pieces being spoken for one activity or another, for one obligation or another, right? And so we fill up our lives with these little bite-sized pieces of our time, each given their proper due. And what it does is it keeps us from being able to experience in the moment the things or the people that matter the most. The reality is, if we were honest, we have all surrendered our freedom. As human beings living in this world, we've surrendered our freedom to a machine that bosses us around. Who here doesn't live by the determination of the clock? Anybody? No. We all surrender to the boss of the clock. It starts out first thing in the morning for many of us. I know there's a few of you out there, you wake up naturally, right? Your body just kind of gets you up. Your little wonderful biorhythms make it possible for you to get up without any outside influence. But for most people, the machine makes an obnoxious sound and alerts us that it is time to start the day. Am I right? And then as we're getting ready for the day, we are looking at the clock. How much time do I have before I have to start screaming at my kids so that I can get them to school on time, so that I can get to work on time, right? Right? And I have this appointment and that appointment. I have this obligation. And maybe if things go just right, I'll be able to squeeze this thing in between those two things. How many of you know what I'm talking about here? We've surrendered to a machine. It bosses us around. It tells us, hey, you have spent too much time on this thing. And that thing might be a person, right? You ever have a conversation that just feels like it's going a little too long? Right? You spent too much time on this thing. The clock reminds us of how much time we have before the next thing. And then if we don't follow its determination for us, then it starts to nag us about how, well, now you're late for the next thing. Jesus was never distracted from what mattered now. And this had some really, really strange consequences, particularly for Jesus. Let me share with you just a couple other quick stories of Jesus' life. For one, it says, now when Jesus returned, this is in Luke chapter 8, when Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. And here in this scene, there was a man who came to him. His name was Jairus. He was a ruler of the synagogue. He was kind of like, the leader of, the Jewish church of the day. And he fell at Jesus' feet and he begged Jesus to come to his house because he had an only daughter. She was about 12 years of age and she was dying. The Bible tells us that Jesus said, I will go with you, and they began walking, of course, because they were always walking. No ambulance sirens for Jesus, right? He's just walking to Jairus' house. And the Bible describes the narrative how the crowd started to press in on Jesus, and they were like an obstacle, getting in the way of him getting from here to there quickly, right? Because they were pressed in all around them. They all wanted their piece of Jesus. But then there was this one particular individual. She's famously known as the woman who suffered from an issue of blood. She had this disease for which she had tried to find a cure all of her life and was never able to find that cure. And this was an especially catastrophic disease because this disease meant that she wasn't welcomed into proper society. She was ostracized. She was put aside. Some imagine, somebody with some particular ailment or thing that you like, it just kind of, you don't want to have anything to do with it. And it's like, we can't have that here in our society. That's what she had. So without family, without friends, without support, the Bible says that she pressed her way through the crowd, believing that if she could just touch the hem of Jesus' garment, that she would be healed of this disease. And she did that, and she was. You know what happened? You know what Jesus did? He stopped. Again, he stopped. Even with the hysteria of the crowd that was forming around him, even with the knowledge that this poor guy, his daughter was dying at home, Jesus stopped. He stopped the crowd. He stopped the noise. He even stopped what he was doing, which we would all determine was very important. He stopped because of what she needed in the moment. He turned to her and he said, after she described why she had approached him and what happened to her, he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." Jesus stopped because she needed him to stop. Well, that had some other consequences. The story goes on. While he was still speaking, someone from Jairus' house came and said, "Your daughter is dead. Don't trouble the teacher anymore." So Jairus, you took too long. It's over. She's gone. The story ends with Jesus telling Jairus to cheer up because his daughter will live. And he goes and he raises Jairus' daughter from the dead. There's another story kind of similar to this, a story of Jesus, again, as he is present in the moments of whatever it was that he was doing. Some news came to him. News about a really dear friend of his named Lazarus. The Bible says that he was told that Lazarus was ill, and like not just sick, but ill to where he's going to die. And the commentary from John chapter 11 says that when Jesus received this news, again, he didn't rush to Lazarus' house. Instead, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Jesus was so present in the moment of whatever moment that he was in, people literally died waiting for Jesus. Whether it was Jairus' daughter or whether it was Lazarus, people died while Jesus focused on what mattered now. You and I, we have things in our lives that are kind of like Lazarus and Jairus' daughter. Not people necessarily, but things, circumstances, things going on in our lives, and they're all clamoring for our attention. They're all begging us to rush away from what it is that we're doing now, the thing that's important, to deal with what is urgent. You've heard that before, right? Like we're always trying to solve what is urgent, and in doing that, we leave out what is truly important. People died while Jesus focused on what mattered now, and I would encourage you that maybe some of us, we just need to let some of those things that always get our attention, that always win the day, that always pull us away from the thing that matters, that truly matters right now, maybe we just need to let them die. So let me encourage you with this. Some ways in which we can adapt to the life Jesus is inviting us into, the life that Jesus lived. First of all, I would encourage you to do this. Stop. Stop. Just like Jesus did. Stop. Stop and undivide your attention. If we're going to follow Jesus, we have to learn when to stop. We have to learn when to be still. We have to learn what it means to focus on what matters right now. To learn how to somehow avoid the distractions of the devices and the people and the noise and the opportunities and all of these things that, again, are clamoring for our attention. We have to undivide our attention so that we can place our full focused on attention on what matters now. We have to learn to stop. Secondly, and this is really, 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 really hard for many of us, some of us need to learn how to say no. We need to learn how to say no. We live in a day of great progress and innovation and technology, and all of these innovations and technologies have made it possible for us to fill our lives with more things, to fill our lives with more experiences. And what do? Well, we fill our lives with more of those things and more of those experiences, right? Progress gives us more, and it gives it to us faster, and it opens up the options to add more things to our lives. It's so easy. It's so easy, right? With one-click settings on your Amazon account. All I got to do is hit the button, and on its way to my house is that very next thing. Oh, an opportunity for me to go and do this, or for me to experience that has opened up. What do? Oh, I can't let that pass me by. It just might be that we need to learn from time to time to say no. Because by saying yes so many times, our attention has been divided and we've become distracted, overly distracted. It is well known that Steve Jobs, when he took over Apple a second time, Apple apparently was in some disarray and without real form for what were they going to do? They maybe had splintered off and ventured into a variety of different spaces and directions. And Steve Jobs came in with the primary idea, hey, we need to focus. We need to focus on the one thing for which we are going to be best known. And so he's famously quoted as saying that focus doesn't mean saying yes. It means saying no. We got to learn how to say no. Next, let me encourage you to become properly interruptible. And this is a tricky one because it almost sounds counterintuitive with everything else that we've been talking about. But the reality is when you find Jesus walking through the narratives of the Gospels, you do find him kind of sidetracked from time to time. I mean, I don't know about if you picked up on this, but the woman that we talked about that kind of stopped Jesus in his tracks from where he was going, I mean, she was, or could be labeled as, a distraction from the original intent of what was Jesus' plan. And so what we need to do is learn and discern what it means to be properly interruptible. What does it mean for me to be living my life in such a way where an interruption isn't always this massive inconvenience that's going to ruin the rest of my day? But how do I live my life in such a way that when the interruption comes, it can almost be welcomed? Because I have the space for it, because I have the time for it, because I have the margin built into my life to accommodate that interruption. Pastor Bruce Larson said, but it is possible that the most important thing God has for me on any given day is not even on my agenda. Think about that. You have an agenda for the rest of the day. If today's not a work day for you, but tomorrow is, you have an agenda for how that day will play out. And it could be really complicated, right? And so you have all of these things that you know you have to do. This pastor says, and isn't it beautiful? He says, the most important thing that God might have for me today might not even be on my agenda. It might not even be on my radar. And so he asks himself this question, and I ask you this question. Am I interruptible? Do I have time for the non-programmed things in my life? Because my response to those interruptions is the real test of my life. I don't know about you, but usually the pace at which I am going, I don't have time for interruptions. At least not without some collateral damage. Right? When the interruptions come because I don't have time, because I don't have the margin for them, I'm going to hurt somebody's feelings. Right? Either the person that's interrupting me or the thing that I have to leave off because of the interruption. Like chances are, just the way my personality is, the way I'm wired, I mean, like I'm going to hurt somebody's feelings. I'm going to pass somebody off. I'm going to overlook somebody. I'm not going to recognize that somebody else really, really, really needs me. And so I need to become more interruptible. And then finally, we close with this. With all the stopping that I believe we need to learn how to do for one another, I'd be remiss if I didn't encourage us all to remember that we have to stop for God, too. We have to stop for God as well. Tell me honestly if we're not terrible in our lives at stopping for God. Like, of all the things that are voluntary, that are discretionary, right? I mean, like, I have to go to work. I have to take care of my kids. I have to do my chores. I have to make sure there's food in my house. I have to register my car. I have to do all kinds of, one thing I don't have to do is I don't have to stop for God. If I don't stop for God, nothing's gonna happen. Like, nobody's gonna be beating me down because I didn't stop for God. Nobody's gonna be holding me accountable because I didn't stop for God. Even God himself. He's no bully, but rather he is patient, and he waits, and he waits, and he waits. And because he's not like physically there in front of me, it's just easy to forget about him. It's easy for me to say, even if I have the intentions of, you know what, I need to spend some time with God. I need to do the thing that my heart wants the most in this world. And let me tell you, some of you know this, some of you won't even believe this. But the thing that you want, the thing that I want the absolute most in the whole entire world, it's not food, it's not shelter, it's not clothing, it's not comfort, it's not security, it's not a better relationship with this person. The thing that you and I want absolutely the most, because we've been created this way, the thing we want the most is for us to have a relationship, an intimate relationship with God. A real relationship where we know him and know that we are known by him. That's what we want. Listen, we live most of our lives just dismissing it. We live most of our lives ignoring it. Just, put that away, like without any real care for it. But it is the reason why we are never really fully fulfilled. It is the reason why we're never satisfied. Why no matter how much money we have, no matter how much stuff we have, no matter how good our relationships are, it's why we never have enough. It's because what our hearts want the most, more than anything else, is we want to be in a relationship with God. A meaningful, intimate, present relationship with God. But we just put it aside. Let me read this poem for you. Psalm 46 says, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Don't raise your hands, but how many of you would say, my life is full of trouble? Like right now, I have got all kinds of trouble. Boy, if I could just tell you about the troubles that I'm facing. This here says that God is our refuge, our strength, a very present help, a help right here and now, a place that we can run to, a place that we can find refuge, a place where we can find strength in the midst of our weakness. God is our refuge and strength. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea. Can you imagine just the cataclysmic events of the earth kind of like falling apart itself, the mountains being moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling, though the nations rage, countries in upheaval, entire people groups just uncertain of what the future holds, the kingdoms as they were totter, he utters his voice, the earth melts, and here's what he says: be still and know that I am God. God he's not pushy. He waits and he waits and he waits for us. And I wonder if you wouldn't seek more and more in your life to stop for one another and to stop for God as well. Can you imagine what that would look like if we all did it? Can you imagine if we all committed ourselves, like truly committed ourselves to, like Jesus did, to stop? here's a novel idea. I'm just making this up kind of right off the cuff, but imagine if every one of us, imagine if everybody in society, one day a week, stopped from all of their work, from all of their labor, from all of their distractions. Imagine if just like one day out of the week, if we said, you know what, let's work for 6 days, and then one day a week, let's not do any work. Let's live our lives in that day as if there was nothing else that we wanted. There was nothing else for us to go after. We had everything that we needed. Imagine if like it just, eternity began in that moment. Can you imagine what that would look like? If on one particular day, like you couldn't go out of here and walk into a store and buy your groceries. You couldn't go to a restaurant and eat. You couldn't go to the marketplace and get things. That there was no, all these activities that are happening, youth football or other sport. Like none of that was happening. Like everybody was just commonly in agreement with one another. Hey, we're gonna just take one day and we're gonna shut things down. Can you imagine what that world would be like? How different we'd be able to live and accommodate what's gonna happen on the other 6 days. We need to learn to stop. Amen? The band's gonna lead us in the song as we close out. The ushers will receive our offerings and our communication cards in the next few moments. I just want to encourage you as we close out with this song, just let the Lord speak over your heart. Just open yourself up. God, like, help me to see where I need to stop. Help me to see where I need to say no. Help me to see where I need to just course correct in this area of my life. Because God, I don't want my life to be ruled by the clock every single moment of every single day. But Lord, I want to be present in the moment. Amen. Let's sing this song together.